Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Career Foundry event this evening, where once again we are welcoming back Abby to the channel to present an introduction to web development. So anyone out there who's interested in web development, you are most definitely in the right place. Welcome. And you will see in big marker, we've got a chat open on the right-hand side. So maybe whilst people are joining, just, write where you're joining from, and also why you're interested in a web development. Let me just introduce myself first. So I'm William, Events and Communications Lead here at CareerFoundry, and CareerFoundry is the online school for your career change into tech. And if anyone out there is interested in doing the web development program with CareerFoundry, I would recommend booking a call with a program advisor. This skills workshop this evening is going to be a little bit more specific, but if you've got any questions about CareerFoundry's curriculum, maybe the dual mentorship model or the job guarantee, I would recommend booking a call with a program advisor. And to do that, simply click on the yellow sticky note in the top right-hand corner, and you'll be able to book your call and ask any questions. They're all waiting on the lines, and they are lovely, lovely people. I know them all individually, so do book a call. Yes, welcome everybody. And Abby, we are thrilled to have you back to the channel. I know that Abby once worked at CareerFoundry and has now moved on to Mozilla, but we are thrilled to have members of the CareerFoundry team return. And this is going to be a fantastic skills workshop. Yeah, in the handouts on the right-hand side, we've got the handout for today's webinar. So for anyone watching on Big Mark, you can just download the handout there and click and play along. We're also recording this session, and we will be sending out an email tomorrow with the recording. So if there's anything that you missed, because Abby's going to be moving quite fast, if there's anything that you do miss, you can watch the recording tomorrow. You'll have the handout, so you won't miss anything, and we're going to be sending that email out tomorrow. And that's everything from me. Abby, I'm going to go disappear into the background. You're going to take the floor, and I'll return for a Q&A at the end. Wonderful. Abby, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Will. Yeah, I am also super thrilled to be here collaborating with CF and doing something that I really like, is talking about the web and even getting to write web code with all you folks. So I will actually go to the next slide, because I have like a bit of an introduction slide for myself. So I'm Abhishek. As Will mentioned, I worked at CareerFoundry for 4 years. I've been a web developer and worn many hats, but something that I'm particularly proud of is I've had the chance to write a web dev short course. And someone who likes the idea of learning, teaching, explaining concepts that we find difficult, but then explaining them in a way that are more accessible. Yeah, I really had a good time writing that course. And yeah, we'll talk more about that course later in the session, but yeah, that's something that I'm really proud of. I'm really passionate about the internet. Yeah, all things internet, all things that run in your browser, web programming, standards, accessibility, open source. I have like a sweet spot for all these technologies because of how accessible they are, how they open doors for people across the world to information, to resources that were once like limited to people living in a particular place or enrolled in a particular university. And now all you need like is a computer, doesn't matter when it is from, and an internet connection, and you can access like top quality resources and information, and learn the things that you wanted to learn. So that's a big passion of mine. Yeah, like I've written there, in my free time, these days I'm taking pictures. I've gotten like a little camera that I carry with me and take pictures of my neighborhood. Especially now here in Berlin, things have gotten a lot greener, and yeah, it's just nice to go for post-lunch walk and take some pictures and review them later. Oh, I also love to write on my blog. So something that I really would also recommend everyone is learning in public, meaning you learn something and you immediately write about that, or you immediately try to explain that to someone, because there's just the act of trying to teach someone something or trying to write a tutorial on the topic that you have just learned kind of reinforces the learning. So I do that, and I would really recommend, if you on your web dev journey, don't wait for for you to get like an expert at something. You learn about HTML elements today, just try to write like a little blog post on some web programming stuff later in the evening or this week. Yeah, and lastly, I'm currently employed by Mozilla. I work on the Firefox web browser on the side as a security engineer. So that's a bit about me. Over to the next slide. I'll be talking about the agenda now. So today we are going to be building a very simple website. To do that, obviously, you need some tools. The best part about web, and also the reason why I was super attracted to web programming, is it is an extremely accessible field to get in. It doesn't matter if your laptop is like 10, 12-year-old, you can still, all you need like is a computer, a laptop, whatever that is like. It doesn't have to be latest and the greatest. It can be like 10, 15 years old. Like my personal computer is like 12-year-old ThinkPad. All you need is a web browser, which I'm guessing you already have because you're watching this webinar. And you need a text editor, which is also something that you already have. But in like a couple of slides, I'll give you recommendations for something better. So like a better text editor so that we can write code and make better sense of it. But tooling wise, everything you need to be a web developer and everything you need to complete this webinar, you already have that. And that's the great thing about the field of web programming, web development is it's so accessible. You don't need expensive software or expensive hardware to get started in this field. We are going to be learning about a couple of technologies. So one is HTML, and second one is CSS. We will look in more detail into what these technologies, the names themselves mean and how they come in handy. You'll notice I'll be looking at that screen. So I have a second screen that is not in the same direction as my camera, and that's because I'm looking at my slides on that side. Please don't mind that. Okay, and the last one is resources. So once we are done with this webinar, you'll have done some things, but you'll have a lot more questions than you do now because you'll have like tasted the field itself. And you would want to learn more. And the resources section is where you'd get some help from us on what you could do next as your like second step to becoming a web developer. You have already taken the first step. You are already here, so that's all good. Yeah, and that is where we open the floor to question and answers. So we have some 10 to 15 minutes reserved at the very end where anyone from you can ask any question that you might have about the field. If you have any questions, you can ask them. And at any point in the webinar, if you have questions, keep putting them in the chat. And depending on the kind of question, if it is something that can be immediately picked up, we will answer that on the spot. Or if it is something that is more broader about the field itself, then will ask me at the very end. So don't worry if I don't answer all the questions right away. Also, something that Will mentioned is I'll be going fairly fast. So that's the reason for that is because I want to cram these two topics that are fairly broad in themselves into like these next 30-35 minutes. But just because I'm going fast doesn't mean you have to get demotivated. The whole session is recorded. So if you get left out, just keep watching it, and then later just play the video and go back to the same sections where you got left out and kind of try to do the exercises again. And just remember that you have all the resources in place on the internet posted for free, so you can always watch it again. So that's the brief agenda. I want to quickly show you what we are going to build today, and I want to get you slightly excited about the next 50 minutes. So, ta-da, sneak peek. We are going to build a website of what could become the best pets for humans, basically. And as you can see, there are some of my favorite animals: cats, dogs, foxes, and so on. So that is something we'll attempt to build in the next 35-40 minutes. Let's see how far we get. Okay. Cool. So this is the first part of our chat. We'll be installing the tooling that is needed to go through this webinar. Web browser wise, I would recommend just getting Firefox or Chrome, downloading that and having that installed. Yeah, either one is fine. Other browsers work just as fine. It is not a problem. But for following through with me in this tutorial, I want you to feel very feel like I'm using the tools that you're using and feel like I'm doing something familiar, right? So just if you don't have it already, get Firefox or Chrome installed. If you have it already, don't do anything. So it's fine. Just use whatever you have. And the second thing is VS Code. So Visual Studio Code. Well, can you just post a link to the link in the slideshow, or I can also just try to search it. If you just search for VS Code and download it for your computer. So if you're using a Microsoft Windows computer, just download it for Windows. Yeah, if it is a Mac computer, there will be options for that. I can just quickly show you. So if you just search for VS Code and open the first link that you see, you should get like code.visualstudio.com. And here you'll see the download option. And here you can find an installer for all the operating systems. Yeah, macOS, Windows, Linux, and so on. So I have already installed that, and I would just give you like a minute or so to just get the tooling installed. Again, it's VS Code or Visual Studio Code, and the browser Firefox, Mozilla Firefox or Google Chrome. Thanks, Will. All righty. And I will also ask Will, please, can you just post the handout link again in the chat for the people who have just joined? Yeah, so yeah, or you can also see there is a handouts icon, text. If you click that, and you'll get a link to the web development workshop handout. I would also ask you to download that. It's a folder, it's a zip file. So if you unzip it and just copy it to somewhere convenient, like your desktop, you can see I have already done that. So you'll have a zip file like this. And if you unzip it, you'll get like a folder. We'll go into that in just a second. Yeah, hopefully people are able to follow through. The handout is pinned on the top. Nice. Yeah, I just saw it. While I have some hydration. Alrighty. So the first thing I want you to do, assuming you have gotten far with you have done installing the software. So somewhere in your computer, depending on what you use, you should see the icon for VS Code and the browsers that you downloaded. So you can just use Spotlight Search in macOS or the regular search in Windows and search for Visual Studio Code. And that will open a window like this. You might get like a pop-up or so, but just ignore that or close that. And in the end, you'll get something like this. This is the code editor. This is where we'll be writing our code. You don't strictly need it, but this will make our life so much easier. And you'll see why just in just a moment when we start writing code. All right, so let me just get started. Let me go back to my slideshow. Oh, right. Actually, I have to share with you an analogy that I first discovered when I was learning web code. And this analogy is something that I want you to just keep in mind when we go through the session, so that things are not completely alien. I know you're hearing about HTML, CSS for the first time, but I want to draw some comparisons from that alien field to something that is more familiar. And the analogy is that if a web page is just one page in a website, right? If a website were a person, HTML would be like the skeleton. So HTML is what defines, what gives meaning to content on a page. A web page is just content. You go to wikipedia.org, you see there is like a big text title, and there is some introduction text. There is like a sidebar with an image and some additional info, like quick information. All of this is some kind of content, which is text, images, animations, videos, but it is arranged in a specific way. It's like some are displayed bigger, some are doing some particular thing. Some are telling you that something is a title, something is an index for what is to come in the page. HTML defines the purpose of content. So HTML defines if something is an image, something is a piece of text, etc. And that is the skeleton in our analogy. It gives structure to our web page and gives purpose. Without HTML, there is nothing. Nothing else makes sense. You can't just have CSS or JavaScript without HTML, right? CSS would be like the skin. CSS is what gives the web page its appearance, its characteristic, its colors, its everything that looks nice on a page is CSS. You can have a website that is perfectly working in HTML, but it probably wouldn't look good, or it wouldn't be super usable unless you style it with CSS. And the last part of this analogy is JavaScript. JavaScript is like the muscle of our person, of our web page as a person. It makes things move, and it allows the skeleton and skin to actually be useful and responsive to stimuli. You can have a web page without HTML, CSS, but JavaScript would make it much more alive. And JavaScript is something that we would not talk about in this session, but it is something that you can freely learn from the resources that we'll be giving you at the end of this session. So yeah, so that's an analogy I want you to remember when we talk about things, because it is easy to get lost in the technical jargon, like, oh, this things that we have never heard of. But just remember, HTML are the bones, is the skeleton, what makes the page actually stand on its own. CSS is what puts skin on the skeleton. It makes things look good. It makes things appealing to actually interact with. And JavaScript is the functionality. If you push a skeleton, it would fall down unless it has muscles, in which case it would try to stand on its own and even fight back if you program it that way. Programming itself is you'll hear me talk in this way, that, oh, I'm telling the browser to do this. I'm using JavaScript or HTML to tell the browser these are my intentions. Think of programming just like talking to a little child. A computer is like a little child, right? It accepts your instructions, which is the code that we'll be writing, and it acts on it. It's like a very obedient child. It does exactly what you ask it to do. So I'll use this way of talking that, oh, I'm asking the browser to put an image here. I'm asking the browser to make this text like big, and so on. Okay, so that was our analogy, and I'll quickly move on to HTML. So what is HTML? HTML stands for a hypertext markup language. It is the basic building block of the internet. Hypertext means text that takes you from one place to the other. You're on Twitter and you see this nice YouTube video that someone posted, and you click it, and now you're on YouTube. You clicked a hyperlink in hypertext. So that's hypertext. And markup language is just language of some kind that we don't need to worry about right now. Like I said, HTML gives structure to the content on a web page. It's the skeleton. What we need to know for this session is, how do you write HTML elements? So I've written a couple of HTML elements in this on this slide. You write the content. You have the content that is put between HTML tags, and you surround that content with HTML tags. HTML tags are written with square brackets. So you see square bracket opening, h1, square bracket close, and then you have the content. And then square bracket open, and then slash says that tag ends there. So h1 opens before hello world, and h1 closes after hello world. And then the next one is P, standing for paragraph. And then the same with P. Oh, actually, there is a typo there. The P should also have a closing a slash there. But you get the idea. I'll show you when I start coding. So that's how HTML is written. That's basically telling the browser, I want something to be a heading or something to be a paragraph or something to be an image or whatever, right? I'll show you the HTML tags that we'll be learning today. So we'll be learning about the image tag, which is img. We'll be learning about heading tags, which is h1, h2, all the way until h6. H1 being the biggest heading, h6 being the smallest heading. We have the good old paragraph tag, which is just any piece of text that you want to put on a page that is like a paragraph. And we'll be talking about a special division tag, which is how you group content, pieces of content together. So you have an image and some other stuff that is somehow functionally related. So maybe it's like the profile section of a website. You want to be able to group them together. And the way we do that in CSS is using division. Think of that as a box that holds stuff but doesn't have much meaning on its own. All right, I will waste no more time and get directly into programming. So we have VS Code open here. What I want you folks to do is click open here, and it will show you all the folders that you have. And I have my HTML workshop folder here, and I'll just open that in VS Code. So if I do this, I will already have a folder called images with some images and a blank HTML index.html file open. I'll do that again. So you have to open VS Code from wherever you open it, like from the start menu, or on Mac, you can search for it. Then you have to click the open link here. You can see this. It opens the dialog box that asks you to open, like specify which folder you want to open, and then navigate to my desktop, which is where I saved that file, and to the HTML workshop, and I open it. Right, so this is now open, and then I'll open my browser, which is Firefox in this case, and I will click File and Open File, which also opens the same dialog and allows me to specify which file I want to open. And then I just go to HTML workshop, and I click index.html. And if all goes well, you should see a blank page, because we haven't coded anything. It should be blank. I'll do that again. File, open file, and specify the location. So it could be on a different folder. It could be in your downloads folder if you have not moved it. But for me, it is like on my desktop. So here it is. OK, I have this open, and here. So I'll be writing HTML code, and I'll be talking about that. Before we do anything, I just want to make sure that I have my HTML actually working, so my code actually working. So I'll just put like an h1 tag, and then I'll write hello world in that. And I'll refresh, and I see hello world. I'll increase the size of my browser to 200%, and you see hello world. And just so that we are sure, hello world from here or something. Yeah, and if I have to go to the other window, and I have to click Command R or Control R to refresh the page, because the page wouldn't refresh on its own. So after making sure that our page is actually working, we can start writing HTML. So the first thing you need to write is doc type HTML, which tells the browser that this is an HTML document. We are writing HTML in this file. Again, I use the terminology, the way of saying I am telling the browser that this is an HTML document, because this is programming. We are programming the computer to act as we please. Then we need an HTML tag, which is always, every HTML page has to have an HTML tag. So I have the HTML tag here. And inside of the HTML tag, I'll create two tags. One is the head tag, and the other one is the body tag. Head tag contains anything that is related to the page, but is not supposed to be shown on the page. So your styling that we'll talk about, your page title, everything that is not actually going to be rendered or displayed inside the page, but it's still related to the page, is going inside the head tag, and the body tag is where the real action happens. This is the part that is actually displayed to the on the browser. So I'll give you a quick example. I'll put like a title tag here. And you can, okay, so you can see that our text is gone because I removed it. And you can see that in the top on the tab itself, like the tab name is like /users/something something something. I want this text to say best bets on the internet. So best bets on the internet. Cool. And I'll go back to my browser and I'll refresh it, and you can see best bets on the internet. So we have the title of the page set. It is not in the page, and that's the reason we write it in the head section and not in the body section. Okay. To make this easier for me, I have kind of screenshotted the sneak peek image of what I want to make, and I have just bookmarked it, and I'll just open it here. Yeah, so just so that I have a reference on what I'm trying to build. This is similar to how when you're working as a web developer, you'll get this image in some form from the designers in the company. And then as a web developer, as an engineer, you have to implement it and you have to make the right decisions about many things. But think of this thing as something that has come from the design team of my company, right? Okay, now I have this to look at. So I have this big text on the page. So I'll use h1 tag, which is heading 1, and then I'll say best bets on the internet. Oops. And then the next is a picture of a dolphin, which is like this profile picture. I have already added that to the handout zip file. So it's called the profile-picture.jpg. I'll use an image tag with an src. And I'll say images. So you can see Visual Studio Code already helps me populate that. So if I click this, I can already just select this. And I end it, and I save it. And if I go back to my page and refresh it, yeah, I already have the heading and the profile picture on this page. It doesn't look quite as like we really want it to, but that's not the job of HTML. That's the looks department. That's where we write CSS. But for HTML, we just put all the things that we want on our website in place. So the next one is a paragraph. So next one is this best bets and curating the best pet pictures for you all text. And as it is just simple text, I'll just put it in paragraphs. Best bets. And the next one is curating the best pet pictures for you all. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we can check every time we save, but we don't have to if we are confident that it is working. Yeah, so it is working because I can see this, and I can see this. And there is no styling to it because it is just a simple text paragraph. The next one is the HR, which stands for horizontal rule. And you can see that's this line here that's dividing the page between like this image grid and the profile section. And then I have images. So I have 6 images of pets, and all the images are stored in the same folder, pet1.jpg and jpg. And then the second one is src images pet2.jpg. So if I just do a little sanity check, yeah. So first 2 images are appearing on the page, but we need 4 more. So I'll just copy the second link 4 more times, and then I'll just change the name. So it is pet3.jpg, pet4.jpg, pet5.jpg, pet6.jpg. That's how they are named. You can actually see that they are named in that way. So I can just easily use sequential naming. And the last thing in our page is this. It's like a copyrights notice. So this is also simple text. So I'll just use copyright I'll just put a C here, 2023, best pets, all rights reserved. Okay, so this should work. If we go back, we have all the images, and then we have the copyright C. And the way you make the C to actually look like a C is you actually use something, let's say, that is like this. So ampersand, so and character, copy, and colon. So and copy and colon, and that is how you represent a character that's not necessarily on your keyboard. And the copy would change to something else when it is a different character. So if I refresh, I get like this nice C within a circle, typical copyright yeah, icon. Yeah, actually that is it for the HTML. If you look at what we want to build and what we have already built, it's not quite the same in terms of how it looks like, but information-wise, which is the job of HTML, it's the content. The content is all here. The title is here, the profile picture is here, all the text is here, the images are here, the copyright is here. And this is what I mean when I say HTML defines the page, the content on the page, the purpose of content on the page. It has already done its job. This is it for HTML. It has already conveyed all the information on this page without the styling. And that is when I will go back to my slide and we'll talk in brief about CSS. So let me switch. Hopefully I can. Okay. Right. So I hope that was, I know that was super fast, but all of this, like I said, recorded, just take your time later, rewatch it and retype it out exactly. If something doesn't seem to work, just check file names. Usually that is where people make mistakes. Like instead of pet-1, you have just written pet1, and that matters. And then you'll get like an image that doesn't show up, right? So check each spelling correctly, because computers, like we established, are not very smart. They need exact information, exact instructions to do something. Alrighty, let's go to the next slide. We will talk a bit about CSS. So after a brief sip of my water. Hydration. Okay, what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, which is a bit of a mouthful. And honestly, when I learned web development, I didn't even know what cascading meant, like not in terms of web development, but in English. And what cascading really means is just something that falls from like one level to another level, like a waterfall. And it requires some background to understand why it is called cascading style sheets. So I'll just suggest right now, stick to CSS, and when you write more and more CSS, you'll see how it works, and you'll it will become self-evident that this is why they call it cascading. Okay, yeah, but don't really bother into looking why it is called cascading just yet. Like I have already mentioned, CSS describes how a web page should look like. That's the job of CSS. So for defining how something should look like, you should have something in the first place, which is why we wrote HTML before we got to CSS, because if we had just started with CSS, we wouldn't have anything to actually style, because we hadn't actually put anything in the page in the first place, right? Let's see how CSS looks like. CSS works with something called selectors. That's the technical term for when we use this functionality built into CSS to select HTML. Like I said, CSS is nothing on its own. CSS styles HTML elements. So you need some way of pointing to the HTML element that you're trying to style. So if I have a web page that says that this is like some text, this is some images, and so on, I need some way to point out to those things. I need some way in CSS to point out to that text, to that image, and so on, so that I can actually give them some styling like colors and make them italic or bold and so on. I've written down a very quick short example there, you can see HTML. There was the h1 tag that we already looked at. We wrote that. But in this h1 tag, there is a class equals heading text inside of the HTML tag. And that's called an attribute. And this is a class attribute. So attribute is something that modifies the HTML element, right? It's like giving it a special meaning. So that's a way of saying this is not just any HTML h1 tag. This is an h1 tag with the class heading. What that helps us do is in our CSS, when we write the styling for a page, it helps us select the heading. Here you can see it is like dot heading and then some curly brackets. And then on the next line, I have written color red. So if I quickly go to the previous paragraph, previous slide, you can see my first web page, the text in the screenshot below the text, it's in red. And that's red because the CSS here, heading, dot heading, color red, is actually getting applied to that text. This is kind of enough CSS knowledge to actually go back to our page and actually make it look like the sneak peek promise that I that I made in the beginning. So let me share the screen again. No, this is pretty technical. The part of like switching stuff. Okay, so this is our good old page. This is how it looks like. This is how we want it to look like. And CSS is going to bridge that gap. So first things, where do you write CSS? For now, we are going to write it in the head section. Like I mentioned, CSS is not something that is part of the content of the page. So you shouldn't write it in the body. It's something that describes the page. So it's written in the head section. So, oops, that's not right. Style, not the thing that I wrote. Style. Yeah, so you write style inside square brackets, and then you end that, and we'll write all of our CSS in the space between. So I just make some space for myself, and this is where we'll write all of our CSS within the style HTML tag. All right, so each one that is, so the first thing I have to look at is, yeah, so the first thing I notice in this page is, okay, the heading looks okay. That's at the top of the page, that's fine. But the image is not right. So first of all, it is fairly tiny because the profile picture is supposed to be tiny, and yeah, it's round, and my image here is square. How do we fix that? We first of all give the image tag a class. Oops, why did it become capital? Yeah, this is better. So I'll say profile picture. And this is a class. So I'll use, just like we saw before, dot profile picture and open bracket. And then here I will just write width 80 pixels. So 80 pixels on my screen. I want the width of this image to just be 80 pixels. And I will go back and I'll refresh my page. And yeah, this is kind of the size that I was wanting the profile picture to be. And then I'll make it round. So the way you make it round is you use, so everything that we write inside only gets applied to this class, which is currently set to this image, right? So when I write stuff inside here, and when I say stuff, I mean CSS, it only gets applied to this image, and the rest of the images look the same because those images don't have the same class. So I can just also write here border radius and 50%, which is how you make something round. And voila, we have a round image, which looks like a profile picture image. And just as proof that this is class that is making it work like that, I can just copy this and I can paste it here, and we can refresh. And you can see my cat is already small now and with a rounded corner. That's because I've given it a class selector, which I didn't want to do. So I'll remove it, refresh, and my cat is back. Okay, the next thing I want to take care of is the text on the right side of the image. I want it to be on the right and not on the bottom. So the way you do that is you make the image actually float. So float on the left side so that everything sticks on its right side. And I want some border on this image. So I'll just do border bottom, so 20-ish pixels so that everything falls. Oops, yeah, right, I can't do that here. But I can, yeah, okay, so yeah, I'll probably have to fix this. So I'll probably have to get this horizontal line down, but I don't actually have to, right? Oh, I don't actually have to. I can probably just make the space here a bit more, but I can look into that while I'm actually, after I'm done with the basics. So, okay, the next thing I want to do is the images should be shown like 3 in each row and not like this, stacked on top of each other, like they have no styling. So the way I will do that is I will get a div and I'll say, so remember, a div is just a box. So I'm just going to surround these images with a box. So I'll say images grid. I can call it anything, but it has to be a bit descriptive so that the next time I'm reading it, I can remember why I wrote it. So I just added a div there, and in the CSS, because it is a class, I can do images grid, and I can here write image, which is now selecting the image inside of the images grid. And I can say width 300 pixels. So don't become whatever size you feel like, just become 300 pixels, right? Right. And if I reduce the size a bit here, I can see, yeah. So I can also just give it some margin, maybe 50 pixels. What is up with the spacing here? All right. Yeah, I have to just look at the spacing here. So I'll just use something that is called DevTools, which is something that helps you debug web pages. So you can actually look at the code that you have written in your code editor inside the browser, and yeah, you can just see why some things are looking the way they are. Okay, alrighty. So we have the images nicely stacked in like rows of 3. But if I just expand the page, oh, it's actually not stacked. And that's because we actually didn't we created one big div, but not a div of 3 images each, right? And the way we would do that, let me just reduce the size again. And I'll just zoom out a bit so that I can, yeah. So now we have 4 images and 2 images. We don't want it like that. What we can do is we can create 2 boxes instead of 1. So I have a box here, and then I have a box with the same name here. Oops. So I have, I don't want that. Yeah, so I have a box with 3 images here, and then I have a second box with 3 images, both having the same class. And if I refresh now, I should have 3 images in each row. So that is what we wanted to do with this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then the last thing that I see here, or second last thing actually, that I see here is this thing has to be centered. So you can see it is in the center, and here it is on the side. So I'll just quickly give it a class as well. Copyright. And I'll just create that here. And I'll say text align center. You'll see I'm just recollecting these things out of memory, and that's because I have done this in the past. But when you're starting out, you will Google something like how to center align text in HTML. And then you will find some links. And then when you click on those links, you would be, you'll be shown some options. So here you can see like, oh, okay, it's the text align center property that you have to use, and which is exactly what we have used here. We have just used it in a different way. So when you're starting out, you'll be doing a lot of Googling, but yeah, that's how every single person learns web development. So don't feel like you're cheating or anything. And I refresh, and now it is in the center of the page. Just that the center of the page is somewhere here and not necessarily on this side. And we can quickly fix that by surrounding the whole page within like a box. So div, and I'll call it the container because it is containing the whole page. And this whole thing is actually inside of my container now. Okay, so now it is inside. That shouldn't change anything. But now when I do container and say max width, say, I don't know, 990 pixels, because I have 300 images with 300 pixels width each. And now if I change the size of my browser, it is always in the center of the website that I'm trying to create. And yeah, last thing, also, I want this background color. So, oops, where did it go? Okay, so I have my container class. I can just say something like background color is light blue. So as you can see here, when I just start typing, oops, I already get like an option of all the colors. And these are not all the colors that CSS selects. You can select CSS has, you can have like infinitely as many colors as you want. These are just the colors that have names. So I'll just use light blue, which is exactly the color that I have used here. And if I go and refresh, now I should see, yeah, exactly how, exactly like what I wanted the page to look like. And if I wanted to just add some spacing, you can see like it's just looking a bit more spacey and nice here. And here it is like touching the edges. I can just add something called as padding, which pads, so 20 pixels, maybe, I don't know. And if I refresh, okay, now I have some spacing around the page. So that's basically how you make websites. You have something to refer to, and then you just keep adding stuff. You keep adding the content that you have. You keep adding the styling that you have. You keep going back and making sure it looks kind of like what you want it to be. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does, but it's okay. The primary goal is to make sure the information reaches the users, and they have the users, as in the customers of the company, and they have a good time visiting your web page and using the features that you have created for them. That's kind of like yeah, the hands-on part of this this session. I will go back to my slideshow because I want to like give some time for the reviewing what we learned, and then some time for question and answers. So let me just switch. All right, yeah. So I know it was a lot of information, and it was, you might have more questions right now than when you started the session like 40, 50 minutes ago. And that's a good thing, because that whole unknown unknowns thingy, now there are a lot of known unknowns for you. You have questions like, why are selectors written in that way? What if I want to add a video to a page? You have questions that you can now Google and find the answers to. So this is a good outcome for me, is I've gotten you all a bit curious about the field, and now I can recap and then give you the resources to continue your journey towards becoming a web engineer and a software engineer. Alrighty, recap. We looked at and gained a basic understanding of 3 pillars of web development. So the 3 pillars being HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We didn't write JavaScript, but we did write HTML and CSS and created a basic web page out of it. Every web page that you see on the internet, be it your university website or Facebook or Twitter or you name it, it's made with these same 3 pillars of web programming. And now you have actually written your first few lines in those technologies. We created our web page with text, images, styling, and some color, right? We kind of created the things that we have been used to of just using as on the other side, and now we have the power and we know how to create these web pages, and it's just getting your feet wet into the wonderful world of web programming, web development. So that was what we studied. I want to give you some resources. All right, so first one is the internet itself. Like I've said, the internet is this huge, kind of comes close to being like something like a leveler of knowledge and opportunities. And in this case, it is no different. It gives you access to like hundreds of well-written tutorials and guides, and that you can just freely open up and learn in your own time. And so that is, for me, that's something that you should make use of, is learn how to search the internet for the questions that you might have, and then find all these amazing resources that would help you on your journey. If you want something that is a bit more guided, during my time at CF, I have written this short course. This is a 5-day web development course that covers installation of the tooling that we did, HTML, advanced HTML and CSS, and it also covers some basic JavaScript. So if you're feeling up to the task, just register for this short course. Give it a try. Every day, like half an hour to 1 hour, you invest in this, and you come out with like a complete website that actually has JavaScript and some real functionality to it. Actually, to talk about the next two things, I'll bring back Will, because I think he'll do a much better job at explaining those things. So Will, are you around? Yes, you are. So take it away.
I'll just re-emerge. Thank you so much, Abby, for presenting this evening. I think that gave everybody who's watching a great taste of what web development is, and also how you can go from nothing to actually having your kind of first functional website, all in 45 minutes, which is amazing in itself. I would just mention what Abby mentioned here, is that I do recommend for anyone watching to try out CareerFoundry's web development short course. Abby does feature throughout, and I've linked that into Big Mark on the right-hand side. And for anybody who's thinking about CareerFoundry's full web development program, I've also put a link there. You can complete this program in under 10 months, and you'll find more information there. But I think what we'll use for the time now is for questions. So if anyone from the audience has any questions, do drop it in the right-hand side. And maybe, Abby, I'll just kick it off by asking, why did you think that web development was for you? What kind of inspired you about the industry?
Like I said, I'm a huge fan of the internet as a whole. I had a huge interest in programming, and when you're programming, it is a form of engineering, and you look for platforms on which you can engineer stuff on, platforms on which you can build stuff on. So, for example, when you use an Android app, that's a platform. That is Android engineers build Android apps, and similarly, iOS engineers build iOS apps. Game developers build games, and for me, the internet was the platform that I was constantly mesmerized by. It's like how accessible it is, how easily I can build stuff. I can build a form that has validations, and I looked at, I used websites and I saw their source code, and I thought, oh, I can understand this. I can understand the source code of Wikipedia and whatnot. And that really was this huge boost of motivation that I can do exactly things that I use myself, and that got me into web programming. Yeah.
Awesome. And like in your day-to-day when you're working at Mozilla, what resources do you use, or what blogs do you use to try and keep up to date with because the industry moves quite fast. How do you stay up to date as a web developer?
I have that's a good question. I think there are two sides to it, right? One is, how do you find help? And to find help, all you need to do is be able to Google or like search for stuff and articulate the questions. Especially with language generative AI is coming around the corner. I think asking good questions is already going to be like a huge skill for the next set of engineers. But even today, even without the whole infiltration of ChatGPT and everything, just asking good questions to search engines already yields a lot of good results and good data. And I would say, Stack Overflow and websites like Stack Overflow and Mozilla Developer Network, which is like this reference documentation for anything, any questions that you might have. When you search it, you'll either hit a result from Stack Overflow or MDN, Mozilla Developer Network. Definitely recommended high quality resources. The other is, how do you keep yourself inspired and how do you keep yourself on the frontier of what's happening in the web space? And for that, I would recommend just following subreddits where these guys, Reddit or Hacker News, Y Combinator Hacker News, because these communities are based on filtering results and bringing all the quality stuff on the top. So when something new happens, like Google releases a new update, or a browser has an amazing new feature that you as a web programmer can use, you will immediately know about that. And now you can go back to your colleagues or friends and you can talk about those features, which is something you would do when you work as a web engineer, web developer. So I would say have a list of quality websites that you can use as reference, so that when you're stuck, when you want to ask questions, you can do that on these websites. And then you have blog posts or Reddit or Hacker News, where you can find the next set of things that you could probably learn at your job or as a side project. So yeah, both the sites are important.
I think that's great advice. Also, you touched briefly on ChatGPT, and I think also lots of people have questions about AI and kind of the impacts of AI at the moment. How do you think that AI is going to impact the web development industry, and how are you working with AI currently?
I think ChatGPT made it popular. The penetration of machine learning and artificial intelligence was already happening for some time now in many fields, including web development. So you have already had autocomplete. So even VS Code, when we were writing code, VS Code was already correcting things, and VS Code was already the text editor that we were using. It was already changing things for us. It was already underlining anything that is incorrect or that it thinks is incorrect. So, and these tools keep getting smarter. So the people who built VS Code, for example, are constantly introducing new tooling that helps you do more and more of your work using the machine, so that you have to do less and less of that work, right? And that has been happening for some time. You already have tools that can take an image and then generate code for that. That is already also happening. That is no news. That is not new with ChatGPT. I think you always need people to verify the work, because these AIs that we speak of, they don't know what's the end goal. They don't know the complete picture. So many times you have to look at the work, and sometimes it is wrong and you have to correct it. And when you think about it, programming itself is already, so we think of ChatGPT and we think of this text input, this prompt where we can write stuff and then it gives us the answers. It does what we ask it to do. Programming is kind of already that. You're already typing into the prompt, which is your text editor, and you're asking the browser to do something, and the browser does it. So I think the level of abstraction keeps getting higher. And now we'll enter this phase where you can write to an artificial intelligence or whatever that I want to build this kind of a website. But there is still skill to ask it the right way, to ask the right questions, to proofread, to proof the work that is coming out of the website. Just like we were building the website and we made mistakes, we found them, we corrected them. And I think that is something that will keep happening for some time at least. And like I said, in my day-to-day, when I'm learning a new thing, I use these autocomplete features which allow me to not spend a lot of time constantly going back and forth between the documentation of something, and it allows me to prototype my ideas faster. That is how I use it in my day-to-day work.
I think we've also had similar answers from different guests on the events channel, also in different fields in data analytics. That firstly, to work with AI, so use it as an assistant and don't fear it. And secondly, is to just make sure that you're using it on a day-to-day basis, really. I think maybe I agree that ChatGPT is kind of the buzzword, but probably elements of it were there long before. It's just the new kid on the block, so everyone's buzzing around. For anyone who's watching, I will just post a link on Big Marker to the CareerFoundry blog. There are some more general topics, but we also have specific topics on web development. So do check out that for any. If you want to dive deeper into any of that. And I think another question I have for you, Abby, is that people watching this evening also on YouTube are probably thinking, how does one get started in web development? What would you say to somebody who's right at the start, apart from doing a CareerFoundry short course, what would be the best way for somebody to kind of get their foot into the industry?
Yeah, I think something that I really like about this field is you don't need to go to an expensive university, for example, to get to become a web developer. Everything that is needed for you to become a good web developer is already on the internet. You can, and because of that, I think the onus of proving to a potential employer that you actually know the stuff comes down to you. So it is not so it is like you have to create projects, you have to build projects. So there are websites, just like you would post about your photography on Instagram. There are websites where you can post about your code projects. So having a portfolio of good projects that you worked on during your time when you were learning programming is something that is really valuable. And I personally think that you already have problems that you want to solve. So for example, when you start learning, you want to be able to track the things that you want to do on a day-to-day basis. And you think, I need a to-do app for this. I need an app that can give me like the list of things to do and that I can like add stuff to. Just build a to-do app on your own. Just build a website locally on your computer that can accept like to-do lists from you and then remind you when you need to do them. Just find these kind of problems in your own life and build simple websites for them. And that's the best way of learning, because if you just keep reading or watching stuff passively, it's kind of difficult to internalize stuff. And that only happens when you either teach or when you actually build stuff using that learning. And coming back to teaching, that is the whole idea around writing a blog or doing some kind of teaching. Like when you read about this new JavaScript feature, you learned something today from the internet. Write about it. Try to explain it to other people. See if you can spot gaps in your own understanding while you are writing for other people. And that is something that is how I've learned, is writing and doing. I think those are the most important aspects. And if you need guidance while you're doing that, as we mentioned, like CareerFoundry has a very comprehensive course that gets you connected with the people in the industry and would guide you. So these are all different ways in which you can grow. So doing one doesn't mean you can't do the other. Just because you can find good resources on internet doesn't mean the value of boot camps is reduced in any way. They have their own place. So if you need guidance, you enroll into a boot camp. If you need a guided course, look into something like the Free Code Camp. If you are just curious, go to Reddit, go on the internet, look for what other people are doing and try to build interesting projects on your own. And everything is valuable. So that's how I would kind of approach it, and just immerse myself into this new field and be able to passionately talk about things. And that's all it kind of needs to get into the field professionally and land a job, to be honest.
For sure. And just to pick up on those points, and for the CareerFoundry kind of mentored program, we have a dual mentorship model. So any student on the full program gets the support of a mentor and a tutor. That's our dual mentorship model. and all students build a portfolio of projects whilst they progress through the web development program. The great thing about this is that you can then go over your portfolio and your projects with your mentor, and then when it comes to the point of applying for jobs, you present this portfolio, but you can also talk through the portfolio with the hiring manager. So it's not only showing the work, it's also kind of going step by step and telling them exactly what you've done. And this is the key. This is the key part of CareerFoundry, the support that we offer, but also the portfolio as the end piece to the program. Abby, what would you also say about joining the industry at the moment? Do you think it's a good time to join the industry as a web developer, or do you think are there some interesting pathways? Because I know the program at CareerFoundry takes you to one level, but there's lots of different avenues and pathways you can go down. Maybe if you could just tell the audience the kind of the pathways that web development opens up.
Yes, that's a very good question, because I also want to give our viewers the idea that web development is a form of software engineering, which is a form of engineering, right? And looking at the current state of the industry, it might be a bit discouraging. Oh, like we are in a recession and so on. But I want you folks to remember that when you choose to become a web developer, when you go on that journey, you are essentially choosing to become a software engineer, and broadly an engineer. And the idea is that you are a problem solver. Today, the tools that you use, the tools that you're going to learn are going to be HTML, CSS, JavaScript. In your job, you will probably learn a couple of more tools and you'll master them. But essentially, what anyone who is going to hire you in the future wants that problem solver in you. And these are just the tools that you use in the moment to solve their problem. It's when you train to become a web developer, essentially you're training to become a problem solver with the tooling of web development. And it is as good a time as any to become a problem solver, because that is not a skill that is going to be obsolete anytime soon. So when you are learning web development, just remember that this is a platform, this is a canvas, and you are using the tools to solve problems on that canvas. But essentially your skills are much wider than that. And you have to be flexible no matter what happens, so that you can just pick up the next set of tools and solve problems in that tools. Having said all of that, the web is not going anywhere anytime soon. It's like the platform where things get built, where things happen. So it is a great time to be a web developer. But just remember, you are a problem solver. You are everything in the web space. These are just tools that you use to solve problems and create value for someone.
Awesome. And then lastly, I would say if there's any questions from the audience, do write them now. This is your chance to get your questions answered. But I just have another question too, in terms of kind of like soft skills or transferable skills. How important are kind of like soft skills within the web development industry? Like at Mozilla, do you often have to present or visualize what you're doing to a team? And how do you use those kind of softer skills?
I think soft skills are often overlooked and underrated, but they are really, really important in most roles, I would imagine, but definitely so in web development or software engineering. And I can also tell you that soft skills become more and more important the more senior you become in your field. So when you're like joining a company, when you're joining at a junior front-end engineer, junior web developer role, you're not expected to be doing a lot of stakeholder communication. If you do, that's excellent, but the expectation is that you can use the tools that you have learned well and implement stuff. But as you grow, the expectation to be able to talk to non-technical people, the expectation to be able to mentor people who are just starting out in their careers, the expectation to present and articulate your ideas and your proposals, they become much more valuable when you're becoming when you reach like a mid or a senior level in your career. So that is also a reason why writing about your learnings or teaching other people comes in super handy, is because it not only allows you to learn things, but it also allows you to articulate how you think and make something understood by someone. So learning in public also helps you hone your soft skills. And yeah, of course, I mean, I think, yeah, I had to present a lot while I was in CF. I still present a lot at Mozilla, and that's something that you have to do, to propose, changes or to talk about your thoughts. And yeah, that's definitely comes in handy when you can, articulate things and you have worked on your soft skills a bit. Yeah, so definitely, yeah, work on your soft skills.
Awesome. Abby, thank you so much for this evening and going through the intro to web development, also the HTML and CSS part. And thank you for everyone watching, not only on Big Market, but also on YouTube. Just very briefly, for anyone who is interested in the full program, CareerFoundry's full stack web development program, we are currently offering career change scholarships worth up to $1,385 or €1,285 off the full price of the program. And for those watching in Big Marker, the only thing to do would be to click on the yellow sticky note and book a call with the program advisor. Also, if you've got any questions, as I said, about the curriculum, dual mentorship model, the career support that we offer, the career services support, or our job guarantee, do book a call with the program advisor. So yeah, Abby, thank you so much for joining us again. Do check out the CareerFoundry events page for all upcoming events. And yeah, thank you for everybody for watching this evening. It was a really valuable session. And yeah, wishing you a good evening or good morning, wherever you're joining from. So that's a wrap. I'm going to log out.
Thanks all. Yeah.